There are moments in history when uncertainty is something we occasionally think about, and moments when it becomes the atmosphere we breathe. For many people, we are living in the latter. Economic anxiety, political tension, technological disruption, and a relentless news cycle have combined to create a low-grade sense that the ground beneath us is no longer solid. Even those whose lives appear outwardly stable often feel as though stability is on loan, not guaranteed. In this climate, calls to stay positive can feel naive at best and offensive at worst. When people are worried about money, work, health, or the future of their children, positivity can sound like denial dressed up as wisdom. Yet dismissing positivity altogether may be throwing away one of the few psychological tools that still works when certainty disappears. The problem is not positivity itself, but the shallow version of it that has dominated popular culture. Positivity has been sold as cheerfulness, relentless optimism, or the ability to smile through discomfort. This version collapses quickly under pressure. It asks people to ignore reality, and reality has a way of making itself felt. Real positivity is quieter and far more resilient. It does not argue that things are fine. It asks a different question. How do we relate to difficulty without being consumed by it? Uncertainty places the mind in a permanent state of alert. The brain becomes focused on threat, scanning for what might go wrong next. Over time, this narrows our thinking. We become less creative, more reactive, and more convinced that the future will simply be a continuation of the worst moments of the present. This is not pessimism as a personality trait. It is a nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do. Positivity in this context is not a mood, but a counterbalance. It widens perspective just enough to restore choice. It creates the mental space to ask whether the story we are telling ourselves about the future is the only possible one. Without that space, people do not just feel worse, they make worse decisions. There is also a deeper reason positivity matters when circumstances are bleak. When external structures feel unstable, people instinctively look for something to anchor to. If that anchor becomes fear, outrage, or hopelessness, emotional life shrinks. If the anchor becomes meaning, values, or a sense of personal agency, something steadier emerges. This is where positivity quietly overlaps with resilience. Resilient people are not those who feel good all the time. They are those who can experience fear, sadness, or uncertainty without letting those states define the whole of their identity. Positivity supports this by preventing emotional states from becoming permanent conclusions about life itself. In uncertain times, the future becomes harder to imagine in detail. Plans feel provisional. Long-term certainty dissolves. Positivity does not restore those guarantees, but it offers a different orientation. It shifts attention away from predicting outcomes and towards choosing how to respond in the present. This shift alone can be profoundly stabilizing. Much of our distress comes from confusing what we can influence with what we can only worry about. The modern world exposes us to an endless stream of problems we are aware of, but largely powerless to fix. Positivity, at its most practical, helps redraw that boundary. It encourages investment of energy where it still makes a difference, in daily actions, relationships, routines, and the way we speak to ourselves. This does not mean ignoring pain or pretending everything will work out. There will be moments when positivity feels completely inaccessible. In those moments, aiming for emotional honesty and self-respect is enough. Sometimes the most positive stance available is simply refusing to turn suffering into self-blame. What often goes unspoken is that uncertainty strips life back to essentials. When certainty disappears, the question quietly changes from "what will happen" to "who am I going to be while this unfolds?" Positivity matters because it keeps that question alive. It prevents despair from closing the conversation too early. In the bleakest moments, positivity does not announce itself as hope. It shows up as steadiness, as perspective, as the decision to protect small sources of meaning rather than surrendering them to the chaos of larger forces. The future may remain uncertain. Positivity does not promise otherwise. What it offers instead is something more reliable, the ability to remain psychologically intact while uncertainty does its worst. In times like these, that is not a luxury. It is a necessity.